we've looked at equalities, now we're going to look at inequalities. I want to point out that the inverse property of addition and the inverse property of multiplication still apply. So we want to solve for x. So we're going to do the same thing we've always done. Let's identify what we want to get by itself. In this case, we notice that x is on both sides of the inequality. So we want to get them together. The problem is that this x right here is pretty much in jail. It's in this house, as I like to call it. So this x right now is kind of restricted, okay? Because it's inside that parentheses. So we have to free it. Before we can free it, we have to get rid of this 3/2. There's two ways we can do that. We can either multiply 3/2 by its inverse, and that would turn this into a 1, and essentially make it look like it disappeared. But if we do that, we have to make sure we multiply this by 5/3 and this by 5/3. A lot of students don't like to do that. So what a lot of students prefer to do is to distribute in. So that's what we're going to do because that's what you're used to. And it really doesn't matter in this particular case. So we're going to multiply in 3/5 to both numbers. Now I can't say that this is going to be very pretty. So what do we have? We have 3/5 times x, which is 3/5 x. Then we have a negative. 3/5 times 12. There's nothing that we can simplify because there's no factors here that will divide by 5. So 3 times 12 is 36 over 5. Okay? Haven't done anything from one side to the other, so that's still going to be greater than x minus 24. Okay, so notice once I distribute, that parentheses goes away. We don't need the grouping anymore. But I still have x on both sides of my inequality. I have an x here, and I have an x here. So I need to get them together. So it doesn't matter which way you do it, but personally I prefer to have positive x's. So when I'm looking at 3/5, 3/5 is smaller than 1. So in my mind, I'm going to subtract 3/5 x because I want to turn this into a 0. So I turn this becomes a 0. So I do write a 0 like that when I add it up. And then this just comes down as a negative 36/5 is greater than, well, let's see about that. What is x minus 3/5 x? That's going to actually give me 2/5 if you were to work that out. And it's positive. That is why I subtracted the 3/5 x from this side and turned this into a 0 because I knew I would get a positive coefficient. And then my negative 24 just comes down. Nice. So now x is in one location. So the question is, what do I do next? So what I like to think is when I'm solving, I want to get x by itself. So I ask myself, is it easier to add or is it easier to multiply or divide? What's the easier thing that you learned how to do? It's easier to add. So I want to turn negative 24 into a 0. Because remember, this is like, if you think about that, 2/5 x, that's multiplication. That's a pretty strong thing going on there. So I'm going to add, I'll do it in a different color. I'm going to add 24 to both sides of the inequality. Okay? And because, I don't know, I don't feel like multiplying this by 5 and subtracting that from 36 and all that nonsense, so I'm going to use my calculator. So one of the things I want to show you, and you don't have to do this in your calculator, but it's helpful. So if I do second F1, oh, wrong button. Sorry, it's alpha F1. You'll see that I have a fraction here. So I want to use that. So notice how it puts a numerator and denominator. So this negative sign, it doesn't matter if it's in the numerator or the denominator, but traditionally we put it in the numerator. So I'm going to say negative 36 divided by 5. So that's our fraction. And I'm going to add 24. So you can see, maybe you can't see, it's not very clear with this lighting. Let me see if I can get it so that it's clear. Lighting is being a little difficult here on this, so maybe you can kind of see it like that. Let's see if I can get this to work better. So you can see that it's negative 36 divided by 5 plus 24. And then when I push my equal sign, my enter, it's actually telling me 84 over 5. So this is 84 over 5, and that's greater than 2/5 x. Okay? So the calculator gave me the answer. So what did I do in order to get that fraction again? I did alpha and then F1, which is right there, and see how it gives me all the options for different kinds of fractions or improper fractions or whatever. Okay, so here I have x. Again, I want to get x by itself. So the question is, what is happening to the x? Well, right now it's being multiplied by 2/5. I want it to be just x, which means this needs to turn into a 1 since it's a multiplication problem. So my question is, if I have 2/5, what am I going to multiply that by to get 1? So if you think about it, it would be the inverse or reciprocal, because 2 divided by 2 gives you 1. 5 divided by 5 gives you 1. So I have to multiply this number by 5/2. I didn't give myself much room. I'm squeezing 5/2 right there. I could have written it on the other side, but I'd rather see it with a number. So I'm going to multiply the other side by 5/2. So once again, 5 divided by 5 is 1, 2 divided by 2 is 1. This whole thing turns into 1 as the coefficient. So that gives me x by itself. Yay! I didn't have to multiply or divide by any negative numbers, so my inequality stays the same. So instead of going through all the rigmarole here or putting this in my calculator, if I notice that I have 5 divided by 5, I'm going to extend that division line. I have 5 divided by 5. So 5 divided by 5 becomes 1. So then that leaves me 84 divided by 2. I could use my calculator if I needed to, but I know that 84 divided by 2 is 42. So x, I'm reading it backwards now, x is smaller, because it's on, notice that this is a small space here, than 42. That's the same as saying x is smaller than 42. Okay? So let me write that in words, because we're actually going to graph this. X is smaller than 42. Okay, so the question becomes, how do I graph this? Well, how many variables do I have? I have one. I only have x. Because I only have one variable, that means I am only going to have one line. Let's go ahead and let's put this down here. I'm going to move my paper up. So because I'm only concerned about x, I am only going to draw the x-axis. Now, do I need to number every single number on the number line? No. I just care about 42. So I'm just going to put some mark and say that's where 42 is. And of course 41's here, 40, 43, 44, 45. I don't need to write those. I just care about 42. So I want to say x is smaller than 42. So here I am at 42. Where do my numbers get smaller? Well, this is 41, 40, 39, 38. So my numbers get smaller this way, which means that x must be every single number beneath 42. Does it include 42? I don't see an equal sign underneath that inequality, which means no. So I'm going to have a gaping hole saying it doesn't touch 42. So that's how I graph it. X is on this side of 42 because it's less than 42. And all numbers to the left are less than the number that we're looking at.